Well, hey, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to me. You guys just had the premiere last night, is that right?
Yeah, we premiere was last night. It's amazing how it all goes so fast. We started filming in September, wrapped on 11/11, and then last night was a premiere. And this Sunday, I mean, I can't believe it. This Sunday, it's going to air on NatGeo at 8 p.m. So it's just like it really though happened really fast. That's not always how it is. And
Right.
so for all of us, we're like, whoa, you know. It's very impressive actually that they were able to pull that off.
Um, Bill O'Reilly's massive.
Yeah, you think?
He's really tall. Like I saw on your Facebook page the picture on the red carpet. Like the guy is like a foot taller than Jesus.
It's like two people on top of each other. No, it's totally. I was like, when he stood up, because I did his show as well. He interviewed me on the show yesterday, and he was sitting down. So obviously, my first impression was not that like, wow, he's so tall. And then when I saw him at the premiere, I was shocked, because I didn't see him stand up in the interview, and I thought Kelsey Grammer was pretty tall. And then when you have Bill O'Reilly standing next to Kelsey looks small, which means, just shows you how tall Bill is. But he's a cool guy. He's a very smart man, very clever, and really on point.
Did he take it easy on you on the show?
Yeah, he was really. I mean, he was Bill, right? Like, asks the questions, knows what he wants to ask you, and goes right for it. Doesn't waste time, and definitely that was no exception with me.
Yeah. Um, so there's been you were born in Lebanon, grew up in Lebanon, right?
Yes,
Till you were
yeah,
21.
right. I was born in the UAE, and I grew up in Lebanon. I'm from Lebanon. My folks are from Lebanon. And yes, I grew up in Lebanon, and then I moved when I was 21 to Michigan, to Dearborn, where most of the Arabs are in America.
Right.
And then from Dearborn to New York, I spent about 4 years there, and then I moved to LA, and now I currently reside in LA, California.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Chateau Moussard. Do you know this wine? This famous
Oh,
Lebanese wine.
yeah, from the Bekaa Valley. That's where I'm from, actually.
Is that right? Well, yeah. My wife and I go to a wine conference every year, and
Oh, wow.
Serge Hochar, who just actually died last year in 2014, he was like a rock star. He would come to this conference every few years, and man, people would just kiss the ring of this guy because I mean, he and his family have kept producing wine through like terrible civil unrest and war, and
Mhm.
we tasted. I mean, they cracked open a bottle like from 1968 from my birth year that we drank.
Oh, no way. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, dude,
That's so cool.
I like I
How was
like
the wine?
Googled it. It was like $2,500 bottle of wine. You know?
It must have tasted amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Nice. Do you still have some of that wine left, or you? Yeah,
no, no, but
like.
I've tried some others, and just last night I was at a restaurant and they had like a 2009 on the menu, and my wife ordered it, but then they were out. It's very this very famous wine, and I think pretty hard to come by. But this guy was just a fascinating character in the wine industry, and New York Times like had a big obituary on him when he passed and everything.
Oh, so you know what? I think that might be the reason why I noticed recently and lately in the last few years that there were a lot of restaurants, New York restaurants that have Lebanese wine. They've been carrying a lot of different Lebanese wine from the Bekaa Valley, and so maybe that's partly why.
Yeah, this guy was like a huge ambassador for Lebanese wine, and so that's probably been part of the resurgence. And so yeah, there you go.
Well, I mean, geographically speaking, also, if you think about it, like we have similar, like the terrain, the climate, the soil from like similar to Italy. We're not that far from Italy, so in that sense, it makes sense that we would be a good place to produce good wine. I would think.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, we ended up last night having an Israeli wine instead because they were out of the Lebanese wine.
Right. Same region,
Right,
same. I'm
so,
sure it's very similar.
I mean, I'm doing some writing on. I really was fascinated by the movie. I mean, I have some like my kind of my criticism for O'Reilly is that he kind of buried the lead. Like the lead for Christians is that Jesus is the Son of God and like his death is a theological event. And O'Reilly's like, well, it's just I'm just going to think about the historical aspect of it. So, you know, I thought it's interesting. I think it's an intriguing thing to watch the movie as a Christian theologian, and to see your portrayal of Jesus, which I think is, I mean, I'm not just saying this. I think it was breathtaking. Like, I found it extremely moving as a Christian theologian.
Oh my God, like, is the most important thing for me. I'm so grateful that you're sharing that with me.
Like that leper scene, man. That leper scene just gives me the chills. Now, what I want as a Christian is for that scene to continue and have Jesus heal the leper. But I get that's not O'Reilly's thing. Like, it's an historical account, about like the social political stuff that was going on.
Totally.
So, you know, nevertheless,
you know, there was a lot to cover, and that's what was a challenge. And how much can you put in the story, and how much can you? It's a huge undertaking. I mean, if you really think about it, and I do think that Bill, he is a very courageous person. Nobody can like dispute with that. And this is no exception, because it was a huge undertaking because of what you're saying, and it's all legitimate. It's everything you're talking about is legitimate. At the same time, how do you do that and focus the story in a way where you can still make it work and reach not only Christians but also everybody else? So that's also part of, you know, the challenge I think that they were facing, and then trying to figure that out and balance all of that and juggle all of that. You know, it's a tough one.
No, I take nothing away from him for that. It's just, you know, I think it's you have to kind of pick your lane, and he picked a lane that's to deal with like what does this mean historically, and you know what
he was a historian. As a historian, he was approaching it. You're absolutely 100% right.
Yeah.
That was the focus for him, totally, in every sense. And for me, interestingly enough, I was more interested in what Jesus stood for and who he was, and how you say he healed people. And that to me was the essence of the whole story. And so I was so happy every time I had scenes like the leprosy scene. So I'm so glad that you pointed that one out. I was just talking about it today because somebody asked me, what's your favorite? I said scenes like the leprosy scene, like the kid that was possessed with a demon. Those are, to me, you see how amazing this figure, this Jesus was, and what he did to people, and how he touched them and changed them and transformed their lives, and how he looked at people who were either sick or weak or poor, and not in weakness. He looked at them always as in a place of power, or from a place of power, because they're all God's creation, and he saw magnificence in all of us as a result of that. And I love that. I love the ability to see a homeless person on the street today and not think of them as weak and not feel sorry for them, but feel love and respect, and that they're equal to you. Same with if you see a prostitute, or if you see somebody who's a drug addict, and be able to see above and beyond that. And Jesus was able to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned that scene with the demon-possessed boy, and that is like, in some ways, that's the scene, I think, in the movie that really introduces who Jesus is in the movie. I mean, it's so dramatic, and the kid's foaming at the mouth, and the mom is, just bereft with the fact that her little boy is like this. And so let me ask you this. I tend to, as a theologian, I tend to think, and I read the New Testament, and I don't think that Jesus kind of fully embraced his divinity. I personally think theologically his divinity is behind his humanity, that it's his humanity that's on the forefront. So, I mean, I still believe Jesus was divine and human. I mean, as most Christians do. But I think it's I would think in his early miracles, he did not walk into a room like that thinking like, oh, I know how this is going to go down. But I just wonder for you, as like an actor preparing to play like the most important figure in Western history,
right?
Like, how do you think about a scene like that? Do you think, well, yeah, like what did you think? Do you think he knew going into that room, like how it was that he was going to touch this kid and this kid was going to be healed?
No, no. I think I mean, I don't want to say he didn't know 100. Like he knew, he had a very strong connection with his divinity, and it got stronger and stronger in his journey in life as he progressed and as he was actually seeing the signs. And it's interesting because that happens to us as human beings as well, as people. You know, like we have signs. God shows us signs, and it's either you see them or not. And I have people in my life that have been there and done that, and I have human beings that are healers that touch people like Jesus and have done unbelievable, miraculous things. So I based it more on that because, you know, I'm not Jesus, and I'm a person just like you, and so I have to draw upon what I know and what I see, and I am blown away every day by what human beings and people are capable of doing today and have done. And I base it more on that, the beauty and the magnificence of humanity and what it's capable of doing for one another. And so I use that and sort of incorporate it into the experience of Jesus specifically because I thought that there was a parallel there. The parallel was that simply, you know, God will talk to you if you choose to talk to God, and He will show you signs if you choose to see them. And I think in that story, this is no different. And he was definitely in tune, and he was definitely connecting, and you know, just simply being in nature, in the wilderness, and praying. I mean, you don't have to be religious to see God in nature and to connect with God. You know what I mean? Like, even if you don't believe in God, you will experience Him and you will feel Him, even if you don't define it as God. That's how powerful this is. And it takes somebody who is in a certain place where you're not disconnected from yourself profoundly enough. Because essentially, in the end, your closest connection the closest you'll ever get to God is factored and defined by how close you are connected to yourself. Why? Because God created you. You didn't create yourself. You didn't create your mind, your body, your soul. God gave you that. He gave you the gift of life. And so as a result of that, the more you connect with yourself, the more you trust yourself, the more you listen to yourself, you're actually essentially connecting with God and listening to God. And that's essentially the divinity within all of us. I mean, everything God touches is divine in a way, you know? I mean, I don't think anyone can argue with that.
Yeah. Now, you know, a lot of actors are very guarded about talking about religion and spirituality, and you're not guarded about it. I mean, I think that's been there's been this kind of minor little controversy that of Muslim. I mean, the press refers to as Muslim raised. I don't know. Do you prefer that to like a practicing Muslim now, or do you? Like, where does your own personal spirituality fit into that?
It's just the truth. I'm not a practicing Muslim. That's all. So I have no problem being called Muslim. I'm proud to be Muslim, Jewish, Christian. I'm all of it. You're asking me what I am. I'm not even spiritual, because spiritual is limiting, and it's also still judgmental towards others in a way. They judge people who have different faith. They can judge Christianity, they can judge Islam. I'm about being inclusive. That's my religion, because I base it on one truth or two truths or several truths, but I'm going to list two. We all equally have the right to breathe this oxygen that we have in the air. Nobody is better than anybody or less than anyone to either breathe it or not breathe it. That's number one. Number two, we're all going to die, and when we die, we're not going to take anything with us. So on those truths, I base the inclusiveness of my own beliefs, that I'm all of it. And if you really look at like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, really the beauty in all those religions is very similar. I mean, there's so much common ground, and really the essence of what it's all about. Love your neighbor, treat them with respect. I mean, our Prophet Muhammad said that. Jesus, you know, started that. And Moses, I mean, they all preach similar things. They were all very similar in essence, in character. They loved people. They were charismatic. They touched people. They healed people. They changed people's lives. They loved their enemies. I mean, Muhammad, how he treated his enemies was similar to how Jesus treated his enemies. I mean, but we still managed to not get it somehow. I don't know. We still managed to be very narrow-minded about things and judge one another. And if Jesus says, love your enemy, I mean, what, you can't top that. That's it. I mean, if you say love your enemy and you don't get that, what that means, you know, it's you can't get bigger than that.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You can't
that's one of Jesus' more unequivocal statements that's kind of not really open to interpretation. I mean, it is what it is, right? You know, growing up in Islam, like Jesus is a revered figure in Islam, and like how would you say growing up what were you taught about Jesus growing up as a Muslim?
Just, you know, like how amazing, incredible, you know, prophet he was, and like Muhammad, like Jesus and Abraham, Moses, they were all equal and all, like, you know, idolized and respected and honored and always, like, you know, talk about their teachings, and so I was exposed to all of them from a young age through, you know, the Quran and all of that. And then later on in my life, as I told you, I have a friend of mine who is just one of the most phenomenal people I've ever met in my life. And again, he's the healer. He's the one who is a living example of what happens when you live from a place of love, and how he touches people. And so he also, again, when he came into my life and I was in a very dark place, he introduced a lot of Jesus' teachings again in my life. And he's somebody who read the Torah, the Bible, the Quran, Buddhism. He read everything. And he was able to see the beauty in it all. And he's able to be as inclusive as I think Jesus was. And I mean, to me, he's probably the closest I know in my life to Jesus that exists. And I just texted him. He was supposed to come and see the movie yesterday. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it because somebody had a heart attack and he wanted to go and help the person.
Gosh.
Again,
yeah.
so
Yeah,
just
right.
to give you an example. So it's like, you know, that's why we wanted to humanize the story and Jesus, because I felt like I wanted people to walk out feeling good about being human and proud to be human, because there is a lot to be proud of in the human race in terms of what we're capable of doing for one another. And I thought, like, having him be that way will make us relate to him even more and not feel like, okay, well, he's the son of God, he's God, and well, I'm human. Great, I'm screwed now. What do I do? You know?
Yeah, well, like theologically, for me, the most pivotal verse in all of Scripture is when Jesus cries what Christians call the cry of dereliction, which in the movie is there's in the four Gospels, Jesus says 7 different things from the cross, but in the movie there's only the one, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is the one cry, and it's from Mark, which is the first gospel written. It's probably the most accurate thing that Jesus would have said on the cross. And
forgive them, they don't know what they do. Was that part of them as well? When he asked forgiveness,
yeah, that's right.
To forgive them for
right. That's in there too, and that's in another gospel. But in John, I mean in Mark, which is the first gospel written, it's the shortest gospel. Jesus has this cry of dereliction, and then it just says he cries something unintelligible. He just cries out, and he dies.
Right.
But I wonder, like, it must be an incredibly harrowing thing as an actor to go through this crucifixion scene. Like, how long did it take to film that? How many days did it take?
That was really, I'm not exaggerating, it was really the most difficult thing I've done in my life, period. I mean, in my life, it was just, I wanted it to end, to be honest with you. I didn't want to stay there. I just like, please, let's finish this, because it's just too much and it's intense and it's technically very challenging. I mean, they had me tied up on the cross, and then they had the nails glued, obviously, and and then, I mean, I did a lot of research about that and what happens to the human body, and you have to, like, because your lungs collapse, so you have to lift your body up to be able to breathe, take in some air.
Right.
But then you have the surge wounds on the back, and then he has the nails on his feet, and then he has the nails on his wrists. So the only way to take a breath is to lift himself up, but then he felt the pain from the scourge wounds, and then I couldn't move my wrists. because if I move my wrist as I'm pushing up for some air, then the nails look like they're glued because my arms are sticking out.
Right.
So trying to do all of that and trying to like be in a state of emotionally in a certain place, and my arms, I couldn't feel them at some point. I mean, they were completely gone, and they would have to bring a platform. And as we were doing it, the weather was really great in the morning. It was cold, and I was shivering and shaking. And I was like, no, don't cover me. It's, I mean, you know, that's nothing compared to what he went through. Right. So, you know, that would be a little tiny bit of what, you know, maybe he went through. And so I thought, it's okay, let me just go through that because that's the least I can do to tell the story, I mean, on my end. And then all of a sudden it became stormy and clouds, and it was dark, and almost like God was like, you know, showing up in that moment, and it was surreal. We had to shut down production because the cameras were shaking, and literally we shut down, and then we had to continue filming it another day. Because of that. And supposedly everyone was saying every crucifixion scene that happens in Morocco, that has happened.
Really?
Like, yeah. Isn't that something? It's crazy.
Yeah, that gives you chills right there.
Right. And you know, we're talking about something else. I want to bring it up again, which I thought was interesting you said, and that most actors don't try not to talk about religion or God or whatnot. You know, I have seen it, man. Like, I have seen this person that I told you about, the healer, and how he talks to God and how God shows up in his life. I was blown away. And so I have seen it. It's not like I'm talking just ideas and like books or religion or Bible or Quran. I have seen it happen so many times, and it is unbelievable. And I feel so lucky because between you and me, I don't think I would have been able to play this role had it not been for that person in my life, showing me that and being able, in a way, like God sent me this person. That's how God's talking to me, through this guy. He sent him to me, and I was able to communicate with him and get that experience to talk to God through him and see that through him. And it's amazing how God shows up. There's not one way, right? Like, it's just like, you never know how and when and where. Even this production, I remember I was like, I had a standby ticket when I found out that not only they had me audition for it when I was in Lebanon many times, and then I auditioned for Judas, and then I auditioned for Jesus again, and then Judas, and then finally the Chris Minol, the director, Skyped with me. We had a session over Skype in Lebanon. I don't know if you know, but in Lebanon, the electricity is not very reliable. So sometimes it goes for 6 hours, sometimes for 3, and then the internet is really slow. So it took like a days for me to send one 5-minute scene. Finally, they were like, you know what? Just come to LA because this is not working. We need you to come to LA. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm flying standby because my brother works for Emirates Airlines. And Monday I went, I couldn't make the flight. Tuesday I went, I couldn't make the flight. Wednesday, they all said, don't go. It's impossible. There's no seats. No seats whatsoever. My brother was like, don't do it. It's impossible. I was like, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to get on that plane. God's going to make it happen. Watch. And if I hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't even got the part because that was my last chance to go and be seen because they had to make a decision. They were already like at the end stages and they were going into production, filming in Morocco. I went on Wednesday. I made that flight. My brother was like, do you know how impossible it was for you to make that flight? And there were many, actually, by the way, many things like that similar happened. So it's a very interesting thing. Yeah.
Well, that.
Hey, Tony.
Yep.
We probably have time for more if that's okay.
You bet. You bet. Well, I mean, just to wrap up, I think that's a great testimony to the activity of God, and maybe that you've handled these questions of like, how can a Muslim play Jesus with great equanimity? And now, you know, having talked to you for half an hour, I can see that you're grounded enough as a person in your own spirit and connected enough with God that you're able to handle those questions without feeling like somebody's coming after you or you have to be intimidated by that or anything like that. So, I mean, I just think it's great. I hope a lot of people watch it. And I think it's, you know, I really think it's a fascinating addition to the catalog of Jesus movies. And there have been plenty of...
I think also to add to what you're saying is what's really wonderful and beautiful and exciting about having somebody who's raised Muslim to play Jesus is really the opportunity to build bridges and to connect with one another. Look at me. I'm talking to you right now.
Yeah.
And isn't that beautiful? Isn't that what it's all about? That we're connecting. We're seeing each other.
Yeah.
We're getting to know one another.
Yeah.
And
it's good. It's
and I
good.
think that's not God in here right now. I don't know what is, to be honest with you.
Amen, man.
You know?
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Absolutely. My pleasure. It's such a pleasure talking to you.